For the vast majority of women, this is all about biology, and of course they don't have a penis. But let's not leave out of account that there is a small minority of individuals who were born in a gender they don't now identify with. I, for one, I'm going to respect and support them.
Today, we have received the publication of the long-awaited guidance about trans policies in schools. Pupils will be allowed to change their gender at school and use different pronouns, including, in some rare instances, those as young as 4. New guidance issued by Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, will allow children to use pronouns of the opposite sex, but only after schools have consulted with parents. It says clinical advice should also be taken into account. Primary schools are told to exercise particular caution because allowing children to change their gender can put them on, quotes, an irrevocable pathway and have significant lasting effects. It says, we would expect support for full social transitioning, including changing names, pronouns and uniform, to be agreed very rarely. The new guidance also states that schools should not initiate any action in suggesting that children change their gender, and it points to the fact that some children, I'm quoting again, engage in activities that are less typically associated with their sex, end quotes. And that last line I find really interesting, because it's always struck me that the people most convinced that girls can be boys and boys can be girls are also the people most stringent about what qualifies for girls' activities and boys' activities. Engage in activities less typically associated with their sex. Who defines less typically? Cleo Madeleine is a spokesperson for Gendered Intelligence, a gender diversity and trans charity. Thank you so much for coming on the programme, Cleo. I wonder what you make of this change of guidance.
I think that it is cautiously positive in some areas, but a long way to go until trans children are welcomed and accepted in UK schools. It's positive that compared to the previous guidance that schools had, which was a whole lot of nothing, that it comes from a place of support, of wanting teachers to be able to look after these children. But while there continue to be fundamental exclusions that trans children and transgender people in general face, there's still a long way to go.
If a 6-year-old says that they are not a girl, they're a boy, or they engage in activities less typically associated with their maleness, and they say they want to socially transition age 6, what should a school do?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things there. I confess, I also find it a little confusing or perhaps tortuously phrased, this sort of typically feminine or typically masculine activities bit of rubric. And I think what's being described there is essentially the classic not all girls who want to play football are trans men, not all boys
girls
who
play
want
football,
to do...
boys do ballet. Yeah,
exactly. Your classic Billy Elliot situation. Yep. I think we are all pretty comfortable with that. I also think that socially transition is going to be pretty far outside the vocabulary of a 6-year-old, but you do occasionally get younger children who ask questions about gender identity, who say they're not sure that they're a boy or a girl.
But if a 6-year-old says, I'm not sure whether I'm a girl or not, and they are biologically female...
So I think that is really important for schools, for parents to be able to help them explore those questions as part of an age-appropriate educational framework. But I don't think that it means that every 6-year-old or every child of any age who has questions about gender identity is going to want to start changing their uniform, their pronouns, or their name.
Yes.
But it is important for pupils for whom that does feel like the right pathway, that does feel like something they want to explore, that schools and families feel empowered to support them with that and to help them with that. You know, it's not very common. Transgender people are, depending on where you are, between 0.5 and 2% of the population. Yeah. So it's not loads of people, especially when you're looking at school levels. But it is still important that educators and families are able to support children.
I think it is obviously perfectly acceptable for a school to say to a girl, if the girl feels more comfortable wearing trousers rather than a skirt as part of the uniform, of course you can wear trousers, of course you can. But the idea that that would be part of a social transitioning from being female to being male, why would that need to inform the decision? It doesn't need to inform the decision.
Well, they're two different things, aren't they? You know, you can decide...
Well, arguably, they're exactly the same
Deciding whether you want to wear trousers or whether you want to wear a skirt is what we might call your gender expression. That's how you feel comfortable looking in the world. Social transition describes, I suppose, a meaningful process of changing your gender through things like the way that you describe yourself.
But why are we telling a 6-year-old that they can change their gender?
I don't think that we're broadcasting to every 6-year-old in the nation that you should change your gender. You know, what we really want is for people to live as the best people that they can be.
Yeah.
But letting people know that transgender people exist, that some children are transgender, and that when they are, and again, I'm not saying it's common, but I'm also not saying it's impossible, they should be supported, should be helped to understand what that means. And if trying out a new name and new pronouns feels like the right decision, then schools should have the resources to do that. And, you know, I think it is reasonable, what's described in the guidance, that it's likely to be very uncommon because, as I say, transgender people are a relatively small minority. But I think it is really important that the resources are there when it does come up, because the current situation we have is that transgender pupils of whatever age don't really know who to go to for support, and that can be quite dangerous, and that teachers don't know how to look after the transgender pupils in that care. So, yeah, it is steps in the right direction.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. Cleo Madeleine is a spokesperson for Gendered Intelligence, a gender diversity and trans charity. 5:10. Helen Joyce is Director of Advocacy of the charity Sex Matters, focusing on biological sex being recognised in law and policy. Thank you for coming on, Helen. If it makes a 7-year-old with their parents' consent feel better, lighter, happier to be referred to as he or she, what's the issue? Afternoon.
I mean, the issue is that schools are rules-based institutions that are supposed to keep all children safe, and you can't keep children safe when you're lying about who's what sex. It just can't be done. And I really feel that Cleo's responses there show that the government has some way to go in fixing this draft guidance so that there aren't the sort of loopholes that are being discussed there. The guidance is in some ways very good. It says that literally no child is allowed to use spaces for the opposite sex. No boy in the entire country is allowed to go into the girls' toilets. No girl is to go into the boys' toilets. And it basically sort of says the same for sport, and definitely the same for recording children's sex. Every child's sex has to be recorded accurately. And then it leaves this black box expression, social transition. What does it mean? What does it mean if a 7-year-old says, a boy I mean, says, I am really a girl? I mean, you're not allowed to let that boy use the girls' changing rooms. You're not allowed to let the boy use the girls' toilets. What are you allowed to do? I mean, are you allowed to say, well, I know you're really a boy, but I'll call you a girl sometimes if it makes you feel better? And then how are you to say you're not allowed to go into the girls' toilets? So the government's got like 70% of the way there, but that sort of waffle from Chloe just showed the loopholes that are left and the lack of clarity that's left. But so the government needs to close those.
Yes, if the boy pupil wanted to wear a skirt in school or a blouse and change their pronouns on their book, I don't know, whose nose is going to be put out of joint?
So it's a question of what's within your control and what's within everybody else's control. If you're in school and there's a uniform policy, you follow the uniform policy. No child should be outside the standard rules. And if you want to write that your name is, Santa Claus or anything you like, you want to call your pronouns, fee, fi, fo, fum, and put that in your book, of course you can do it. No one's stopping you. When people say that they choose their pronouns, what they're saying is they choose to tell other people to use pronouns about them when they're not there. So that's what people mean when they say change their pronouns. They mean get other people to refer to me as the sex that I am not. That's other people's business, and it's not right. And teachers can't do it because teachers should be paying attention to which children are which sex. And you shouldn't be telling other children it either. You shouldn't be saying this child is really a boy, but we're going to call him a girl or her a girl. Straight away, the question is why? And then we just come back to those wretched stereotypes that you correctly mentioned at the beginning. Like, why does this little boy think that he's really a little girl? Obviously, we have to be compassionate to people, but it is not compassionate to lie to children about something so fundamental as sex. And it sets some of them on a pathway to permanent medicalisation, which is not kind either.
So would your guidance, your ideal guidance for schools, involve them saying to the 7-year-old who says, I'd like to change my pronouns, I think I'm born in the wrong body, you're not?
My guidance would say, everybody is male or female, darling. What is it that you think makes you not like the other little boys or not like the other little girls? Because you're lovely and fine the way you are. You're a beautiful kid. And if you're a little boy who wants to do something unusual, that's fine. If there's something that makes you feel unhappy about being who you are, or unhappy or feel you're in the wrong body, that's actually a safeguarding issue. It's not something to be answered by saying, yes, you're right, you are in the wrong body. No child is in the wrong body. It's so unkind, such a horrible thing to say to a child.
I've always wondered about which bit of that person is in the wrong body. If you are born in the wrong body, you are your body. That's all you've got. It's
exactly.
all your body.
And I mean, we don't say that to disabled people. I mean, a disabled person might think they were born in the wrong body. It's just a bizarre idea that somehow the angels on the assembly line put a little blue brain into a little pink body every now and then by mistake. It's nonsense. You are yourself. You are the way you are. All little boys are little boys. All little girls are little girls. And they can be and do whatever they like within that.
Helen Joyce, thank you for coming on the programme, Director of Advocacy of the charity Sex Matters, focusing on biological sex being recognised in law and policy. As a parent, you do, I think, stretch the boundaries of reality for certainly your young children in ways that seem to make life more magical and exciting. Because, of course, the tooth that is put under your pillow is going to be squirreled away by fairies. Of course it is. And of course he comes down the chimney with the reindeer left shivering on the roof around Christmas time. Of course he does. Of course you can socially transition to be a girl, son. Is that one boundary that shouldn't be pushed at?